Hey guys, so for a little while I've been trying to think of ways to showcase builds and tunes more. But if you guys know me, I don't really like meta tunes. I like building decently competitive personalized cars that's fun and drives exactly how I want. Now I did this before, but I believe I removed the videos of it. I think until Forza Horizon 6 arrives we're going to do a WheelSpin build per week, likely Tuesday or Thursday. But in case you're new to Forza or just never seen any WheelSpin builds, typically they're done by specific goals some people spin for the car and the budget. Well, we're going to do it kinda simply. We're gonna spin the wheel, whatever we get as long as it's not clothing we use to do a build. So if we receive credits we have to buy a car that's as close to that price as we got. So if we only got 5,000 credits, we'll try to auction house a car for 5,000 credits. If we got 2 million credits we'll buy a car for 2 million credits. Not very strict or anything, just kinda basic rules. But these builds will kinda be just whatever, racing, rally, off-road, drifting, any type of build, just a build, and hopefully I can teach you something about building and tuning during this series of our WheelSpin builds, so let's jump into it. Okay, so our first build is gonna be a drift build, a 1987 Regal GNX. Now if I remember correctly this has a 3.8 litre V6 turbo. I'm gonna try to lean on the fun side of building and I'll try to explain my process while I'm doing it. Also I'll attempt to be on the cheaper side of building. There's multiple ways of building a car and some ways are more cost effective than others, lol. Anyways, let's jump into building this 3.8 V6 turbo. So I think we're going to go for a grassroots slower tandem build for this. So we're gonna go with snow tires because they're the best for slow tandem drifting and maybe one tire upgrade. Now this V6 fully built isn't gonna have that much power, so we'll leave it stock. Also if you're curious, yes, technically the stock tires are worse than snow. The thing is that with snow you can make them go just as slow and a little bit smoother than true stock tires. In this case if you was going for a traditional slow tandem car like you would build in Horizon 3 and 4, stock tires all day, snow will be fine though. Anyways, so if you're on like as much budget as possible, sport transmission, we're gonna go with race 4 clutch and transmission, driveline is optional. Differential always upgrade, it's cheap and doesn't cost PI. Not that we're worried about the class of the car in this case, but just keep in mind always buy the race, drift, rally, off-road, whatever type of differential you want because you want to be able to tune them. Other than that, brakes are optional in the sense of if you really don't have the money, suspension and power would do more for drifting, but we're not limited, so race brakes, drift suspension. As a side note, if your vehicle of choice does not have drift suspension and you really want to drift it, rally suspension does have some advantages over race suspension, but it's not nearly as much as drift suspension. Now when it comes to drifting, weight reduction can make or break the feeling of a car. I almost always throw on race weight reduction because I like it to be snappy and accelerate harder. But no, sometimes more weight isn't a bad thing. Say the car was really unreasonably twitchy despite you doing everything to tune that out. Maybe the car is too light, so adding weight would make it less twitchy but also less responsive. So it's just about balance and PI. So say we was building for a class points drifting, most of the time I might not take weight reduction because I'll get better sliding with drag tires and power, but let's say it just doesn't transition and it doesn't feel good to drift. Maybe taking power out for a little weight reduction could make it faster, smoother and more responsive. Most of building is just about balancing the car for what you want, and while we've been discussing this, I'm upgrading the engine, I'm taking the weight of the car and the size of the driven tire in mind. You'll learn that could I throttle control a car with 1500 horsepower on 175 wide tires, sure, but it won't accelerate as nicely, as responsively or anything as lower power with proper tire sizing, and a lot of tire sizing is personal preference. Yes, theoretically there is air quote meta power to tire ratios and stuff like that, but again balancing and personal preference. Now for the tune, I'm gonna throw on a bass tune. I don't recommend following exactly how I do this, specifically with the gearing, but for the most part, I'm putting a bass tune on something that just aims it in the direction I'm trying to go with the build that I know I can adjust, and then we'll drift it a little bit, see what needs changed, and I'll try to explain what needs changed and why. Okay, so firstly, now I enjoy this gearing. I know not everyone would, so I'm gonna demonstrate what other people would likely do here while keeping it somewhat grounded and personalized for me. This is my form of a long gearing, but so most people would look at me getting into 5th gear there as the gears being too short. Most people would drift 2nd or 3rd around something that's small. So firstly you saw me slow down and I was watching the RPM gauge to see at what speed it stalled. It stalled at 8 miles per hour. I typically like to make this around 10 miles per hour. When it's spinning that much instantly I have a little room to lengthen the gearing. So next we're gonna try to aim to use as little gears as possible. Basically, somewhat, so I refuse to actually have drift-only gears. I make every gear theoretically usable in some way during drifting, so we'll exaggerate the drop in RPM between gears, which will look like this. Now because I made sure that each gear is shorter than the one before it theoretically as long as I'm going fast enough that gear is usable. Now you might be questioning, what about your 8th? Also why did you choose a 8 speed? Well, firstly I make my final gear not final drive. The last gear in the transmission long for the top speed. This is not perfect or most cases even correct. This is just a personalization I do because I like short gears. But as you can see this is still a proper gearbox. This isn't just randomly shoved together. I would say 2 and 3 is excessively long, but these still have enough power to drift at their respective speeds and I can downshift if I really need to. But now it's a little bit twitchy. Now there's 2 ways to fix this. Technically more than that, but this is mid-corner twitchiness during counter steering. To me the front suspension isn't stiff enough. Now you can stiffen the front spring or front anti-roll bar. Well here's the thing. If you stiffen your front anti-roll bar it will resist transitioning, which might be a good thing if on transitions it's too snappy. But for mid-corner like I was having it most of the time that's the spring rate. Or you have too much front toe or too little front camber. But I'm gonna stiffen the front spring rate a little bit more to have a natural understeer feeling without it always understeering. Because my anti-roll bars aren't that crazily tuned for understeering, it'll still have snappy transitions. And be able to be thrown around. If you're curious why I add the front toe, it helps make the car want to go straight, so you effectively have more front end pull during counter steering, which makes it more responsive but can also make it twitchy. And the reason I went for 8-speed transmission is because I like short gears and this lets me get extremely short gear ratios without losing much top speed. Obviously we're not doing that right at the moment, but that's my use. I would achieve the same thing with a 6-speed transmission with less top speed or longer gears. But now we're gonna quickly look at the brakes. See, the brakes are set up this way for tandem drifting. I want to be able to press the brake without the brakes causing the engine to bog down too much. Now in Horizon 5 unfortunately 1 this is backwards, the rear means the front and the front means the rear. And 2 lot of cars will bog on brake even if you only have 1% braking going to the rear. That's why I drop my pressure in, making it easier for me to brake with less pressure without bogging the engine and dropping speed. Sure, if I ran only front brakes it would be even better, but I try to have as much braking as possible so the car feels usable outside of pure tandem drifting. Well, I think that's this build done, so thank you for watching episode 1 of our WheelSpin build series. Many more to come and we'll be playing Horizon 6 the 15th, so I hope you guys stick around for drift and racing builds on that game as well. Until then we'll be doing builds on this game with WheelSpins. Thank you again for watching, have a wonderful day/night, see you guys soon.